Greetings and welcome to Learning from TED Speakers. Today we speak with Susy Miller, divorce strategist and creator of The Best Way to Divorce. Her TED Talk piece Delusion in the War of Divorce delves into the often personal experience of creating a peaceful divorce. Discover how her findings bring a fascinating and revealing perspective to the all-too-common event of divorce. Ms. Miller is a divorce strategist, EAP resource, screenwriter, and she tells us that peace is her weapon of choice. Let's get started.
This is a Touchstone Publishers presentation, your trusted source of leadership knowledge.
Well, good morning and welcome on board. We're so glad to have you today, Ms. Miller. I know you're very busy and also know we're at very different times of day. So it's not morning for you, it's evening for you, probably evening for others. So welcome and thank you very much for taking the time to talk about your TED Talk with us. It was just, I found it fascinating. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure, and please call me Susie.
Okay, Susie,
we don't have to be so formal.
Oh.
Yeah. So what would you like to? Well, what would you like to know about the TEDx, which was for me, and a very exciting thing to be able to do.
I have found that the backstory is pretty always unique. So, but I want to start off with just this simple question. So, what is unique, powerful, and need to know about you, or your TEDx, or your organization company? What's powerful and unique about any of those?
The best way to describe that is what someone said to me today. She said, I don't know anyone else who does what you do, and I do something completely unique. I help people with strategies on how to not just divorce, but their families to change form and to co-parent in ways that are more peaceful. And the TEDx was an opportunity to give a message there, an idea worth thinking about, which is that peace is not fluffy and that it takes courage and determination and strategies to make it work.
Well, and that's what's unique about that, because I don't think there's any other discussions about that, and I think it's a great place to learn. So tell us just a little bit about your journey to the TEDx. How did that journey evolve? Did you have any fun or scary events taking place through that journey?
Well, the most scary thing for me was when I found myself pretty much overnight on my own with 3 small children and in a relationship that ended so suddenly. I just didn't see it coming. So for all of those folks out there who've been in that position, you feel stupid. You just think, how come I didn't see it coming? So it was very devastating. And the children were very young. Youngest was just 18 months. Eldest had just turned 6 and had one in the middle. And I had no career left. I didn't really know what was going on. I was in shock and I was very angry and very upset as well. So it was a pivotal time in my life. And of course, it's when difficult things happen that we put on our big girl pants and grow up fast. So it was an opportunity for me to look at my 3 children and understand that I had a choice. Do I go down a road of bitterness and anger and even revenge? Or do I think, well, actually, I've got to co-parent with this guy for 20, 30 years. So I need to think about how to do this well. And it's probably the thing I'm most proud of in my whole life is when I made that decision. And most of that strategy was really allowing my ex the opportunity to be the best co-parent, which didn't always mean that he chose to live up to that. And I'm sure I made mistakes as well. But because my priority was to allow that belief to be there, which at the time seemed a little bit, unrealistic to be frank. That's what allowed good things to happen, and that journey led me to realise that somebody needs to be going out there and waving a flag, going, "There's much better ways to do this," because divorce is in the US, in the UK, in many countries, the actual system of family breakup and the legal system is very, very toxic.
Well, it is. And I was really fascinated by your statement that there is no such thing as a broken family. Even in your TED Talk, you had the feeling that, at least at the start, it was a broken family. How did you evolve that into only an extended family? How did that take place? And how do you coach that in people?
I do it in different ways, and even just with recent discussions, I often find myself talking to people who have a very narcissistic spouse, people who are very, very difficult to co-parent with. These are not the easy ones that I often end up speaking to, and they're not gonna work it out on their own. But I say, you look at your children, and you will see there that half of them is that spouse. And I know you don't like that. I know you don't want to recognise that, but that's the truth. So you need to love that half of your ex, even though they may not even though they may be behaving incredibly badly at this point, but because that's the part of your children. So the children are a real blessing because they give us an opportunity to change how we perceive the situation, because if we have to love our children, and if we can't love a bit, we have to love all of them. So you have to remember that part of them is someone that you probably loved once, maybe had a good time with, and that's very painful to think about when you're in a situation where all trust is broken down and you seem to feel at war with each other. So I ask people to do something that's very difficult, but by using the children in a way as the reason, the incentive, to the necessity to work out how are we going to work together, how are we going to create a brand new co-parenting relationship here, then that's why I do this, really, because it's not really for the couples, it's for their children. It affects our whole society, all these kids growing up, not in broken homes, but in homes that are badly parented, badly co-parented. And I know from my personal experience that even when one parent isn't always doing what you would see would be helpful, you can learn how to hold that space, have boundaries, be strong, have strategies, and give them the opportunity to come back on board. A bit like you do when you're parenting your children, actually.
Now, what I found interesting about the broken home thing, when you shared the story about how your household came apart just all of a sudden, just overnight practically, but yet you were able to patch things up and work through things. So when you had your first I don't know, was it the Best Way to Divorce workshop? I don't know if you called it back then the same thing.
It was a divorce fair. It's a full-on event, live event, yeah.
And for him to show up with his wife at that time, that took a lot of courage. If you're going to coach me on digging up that much courage and also realizing that the children are at stake, is there more than just realizing that the children are at stake here, or is there? How would you?
Yeah, you have to deal with your anger and your rage, and you have to deal with that for two reasons. One, because you have to work together and co-parent because you have children. That's just a fact. So that's the job to be done. But the other reason is that it will make you ill if you don't deal with it. So on a selfish level, you need to, and you can't afford to be ill when you're looking after small children.
Right,
so
right.
That's where I started to learn about the value of coaching, possibly more than counselling. Counselling can be very useful, but often coaching is more useful and more practical when you're in these situations. So it gets you thinking forwards, it gets you planning, and the more you plan a new life and become happy and fulfilled in yourself, you just don't need to hold that resentment anymore. It just becomes a nuisance. So personal development is absolutely key. And for me, I don't think I would have done any personal development if I hadn't been in such a dire situation. So it turned out to be a bit of a gift.
I see what could be a gift, but I'm just wondering, and I don't want to sound backwards, but we haven't really helped women develop self-esteem, develop this plan of action, or understand that self-improvement, or even meditation, or those type of things are useful. When you're working with people in your program now, the Best Way to Divorce online, do you deal with those type of issues?
Yes, and it often comes up in very pragmatic ways. So I might be talking to a woman, I help plenty of men as well, but women in particular might be very worried around the finances. So I'll say to them, who do you think's the most useful person to talk to when you're getting divorced about the finances? And I go, I'll give you a guess. It's not always a lawyer. And what they learn is that there are people called financial planners, sometimes called wealth managers, who do long-term cash flow forecasting. And these are really useful people when you're getting divorced, if they specialise in that area, because they help you work out what's the best way to split everything. And they actually have the knowledge and the skill set to do that, which the lawyers haven't had that level of training. So, but what they often say to me is they get that that's logical, but they go, well, what if my husband won't speak to them? And I go, you speak to them, you work out how you think you should split this, and then you invite your spouse ideally through mediation and then you cut a deal. But you're mediating something, but you've really done the homework, and you can even bring in the financial expert to explain to your spouse why this is a better way to do it. And you just come at it in a very pragmatic, logical way, and you lead the way. And that is a bit of an epiphany for a lot of the women, because they've often felt so subjugated in the relationship, and they'll say to me, oh, but he's the clever one and he deals with the money. And I'll go, but aren't you in loads of debt? Are you not? Are you actually? Surely you're the one who's talking to me now and who's taking responsibility. Don't you think that just maybe you're the best person to sort this out and make it through? And quite often they just kind of need permission to go, actually, I am the right person to be doing this. My husband stuck his head in the sand. He's doing lots of threats, and I often help turn things around by helping them realise that yes, he's saying lots of mean things, but I said, has he talked to a financial expert? Has he talked to a mediator? I said, you're the one doing the research, so you've got this difficult job now of trying to educate this other person, because the best thing for both of you is to keep this out of court.
So you're saying it's difficult, but yet it's necessary and it's the first step. But you just said something that caught my attention through your TEDx, and again just now, the court is not the only place to divorce. I mean,
it's the last place you should be, because you think about it, you're going to have cut a deal over the finances, and that's going to determine possibly the rest of your life, and it's going to affect your children. Why would anybody who was sane hand that over to some judge who's never met their family, doesn't know them, who may not even have very good skills in knowing about how to split finances, and give them that role? I mean, it's bonkers, quite frankly. So there's much better options to do that, which keeps the couple more in control, even if they're not in agreement. They don't have to be in agreement. They very rarely are. Whether it's mediation, whether it's collaborative law, which still so many people haven't even heard of, which is using lawyers, but you do not go to court. You cut a deal round the table, similar to mediation, but with lawyers. And there's arbitration, where you have a private judge, but you choose the judge together. You choose someone that you trust, who has the right skill set in children's matters or financial matters. And you can do it through Zoom, online, so much more quickly, a fraction of the cost. You don't need barristers. You don't need to argue. You just give them the information and they make the decision that's legally binding. Job done.
And I know that sounds really easy for a lot of folks. I want to point you in a little bit of a different direction than even your TED Talk went. In the workplace, if people say you should leave your personal problems at home, which is not realistic because it's going to happen. Your personal problems travel with you because it's you. If you can find a way to make this divorce situation easier, shouldn't people be doing that?
Yeah, but I think the problem with the workplace is your HR person is overworked, harassed, and by the time someone comes to them with an issue, which can be mental health, divorce and family arguments can spark mental health, particularly if it's a dad who hasn't been allowed to see his children for months, possibly years. That can lead to suicide. So you've got lots of this going on in your workforce, and by the time you might find out about it as an HR person, it's really, it's long-term sick leave, it's a cost to the company, you've got much higher turnover of staff. And the problem I find when I talk to people in HR is they recognise the problem, but they go, well, it's none of our business, it's personal, but it's affecting the bottom line. And in the UK, they reckon that the cost to the UK economy overall is at least 53, might be more than that, 56 billion a year, just because
really
of the cost
scary.
of family breakup. And it's huge in the States as well.
That is really scary. And from a leader's perspective in the workplace, it shouldn't wait to the last minute. You should start
And
seeing
just,
signs early.
And the thing is, it's because it is a private thing. You know, my argument is give them resources. This is one of the reasons I created the free downloadable Best Way to Divorce app, is that you can go in, get information. Facebook is great, but it's not that private. So I created the app so that people could be off Facebook. And a lot of the time, if they get the right information, my ambition is I never want anyone to ever say to me again, and someone literally said it to me today, I wish I'd met you a few years ago when I was getting my divorce. I don't want them to have to say that. I want them to have that information right up front. And it's not just the people who themselves are going through it. It's the family, it's the work colleagues, because often those work colleagues will be giving terrible guidance and advice. They'll be going, I know a really good Rottweiler lawyer I can introduce you to. And they can be buying into the drama and actually making things so much worse. And they don't realise the harm they're doing to the children of those families.
Do you find in your work that sometimes, like I said, it's the work people and the families that, no, they love that person, they care for that person. The advice they're giving is, like you said, dangerous, just flat out wrong sometimes. How do you get people to go past that, to coach themselves past that?
I think it's just giving that information and busting excuses. So I would love to go and talk to more employees, because a lot of them will say things, oh, I tried mediation, didn't work. And even mediators will go, well, it's not right for everyone. And my response is, as a non-mediator, is of course it's right for everybody. It's just some people find it very difficult to access. It's very difficult to access mediation if you're livid with the other person, and you haven't dealt with your anger. If you're frightened because you haven't worked with a financial expert and you don't really understand the finances, so you're paranoid around that. So you need to boot camp to be good at using dispute resolution, which is why I run the divorce financial workshops, is to really boot camp people.
You're gonna have to in a little bit tell us all about that, but I have another question. It seems to be the framework of your organization, and that simply is, in the war of divorce, make peace your weapon of choice. Is that the framework for your organization? And if so, how did you come up with that? How did you decide that that was going to be the case in a very tough time, to be peaceful, really?
Because through my own experience, I discovered it does take courage and determination and vision in order to be peaceful. I mean, if you look at great leaders around the world, and I'm not likening myself to them in any way at all, but if you look at people who I admire, like Gandhi and Nelson Mandela, they were not soft. They were incredibly creative, powerful, and luckily most of us don't need that level of courage and determination in order to just get through a divorce and co-parent well. But we do have to step up big time, and it's not about being selfless and being a doormat. And a lot of people misinterpret peace as being some kind of fluffy thing. It's not. People who use peace as their weapon, if you like, if that's what they go into the war of life with, they're people who should be admired and encouraged. And yet, when I first sort of realised that make peace your weapon of choice sort of came to me as a good description of what my ethos and what I believe and what I preach, in a way. Quite a lot of people were uncomfortable about it because they want peace to be this sort of fluffy thing on the side that only works for some people, and I'm like, no, it's sorry. This is for everybody. We all have a responsibility to reduce conflict, but sometimes that means being very strong and boundaried. If you've got someone who phones you up and says nasty things, block them. Don't keep answering, looking at their emails and getting upset. Just stop it. But in order to keep the communication, because you're co-parenting, you use our Family Wizard app, or you create a split smart co-parenting plan, which can be done online, and they don't have to speak to you, but you can still keep communicating about the children. So it's about putting in those boundaries and protecting and standing up for yourself, actually. Because one wise person taught me at one of the workshops that I ran, she said, if you have boundaries, people think there's something to hide behind and put a wall up. They're not. If you don't have boundaries, you cannot communicate well with others. It's very hard to communicate well with someone who doesn't have any boundaries. I certainly wasn't great on boundaries, and I learnt to do that. That was one of the gifts I received from my breakup, was learning how to stand up for myself and go, no, this is how we're going to do this now. And that becomes this amazing sort of miraculous thing that can happen, is that you can have two parents that are in a very bad space, but when one of them starts taking control in a positive, healthy way, putting in boundaries, the other person, who's often quite aggressive and not being very nice, starts to trust them, because actually that other parent keeps being logical and sensible and productive, and the lawyers and everyone else is just sucking them dry and not taking them anywhere. And suddenly and gradually their trust builds up in this brand new co-parenting relationship. They will probably never be friends. That's not the outcome we're looking for here. But it means that they can have a conversation about the children, go to the child's wedding when they're grown up, and sit at the same table, and everything's cool, which is massive for those children as they go into adulthood.
It is very large, very large. You know, I'm going to ask you for a little bit more clarification, because I'm a little bit confused about the boundary issue. And maybe it's just the way we look at boundary as a human race, but boundaries usually mean a wall. Tell us more about what you mean by it when you say, okay, set your boundaries.
I feel like I'll give a little example of my own. I had my ex. He was not abusive or anything like that, but there was a point in our story where he stopped giving us any money, got very angry because I'd said no to him coming to the house anymore, because he just, for good reason, which I won't go into now. But he could see the kids, but I had to put some boundaries around that, and he got very angry. So we had a phone call, and he wasn't very nice, and so I hung up. I normally hang up on people, and probably about 6 weeks later, I saw him come up on the phone, and I answered him on my mobile, and he said, "Oh, is something wrong with your landline? I've been trying to ring you." I said, "After our last call, you weren't very polite, so I blocked you, and I haven't been answering the mobile." That's all I said. And he was absolutely gobsmacked. I said, you weren't being very nice. We've never discussed it. He's never done it again. So there was just that simple. I didn't get angry. I didn't have a go at him. I just basically made it clear through my actions, no, that's not happening. And for me at the time, that was massive. I just wasn't, I was always trying to make things work, and, typical girl trying to make the peace, but actually doing more harm. And sometimes you just got to know this is how it's going to be, but you do it from a place of love. And I often say to people, when they've got very narcissistic, difficult people, when you put those boundaries in, you have a responsibility to help them be the best of themselves, not the worst of themselves. So if you allow that person to be abusive and horrible, you're actually facilitating it. And I just turn around the way they look at it. Whereas if you go, no, that's just not going to happen. This is the way, this is the avenue. Only contact me about the children through the app until we get, maybe later we can talk on the phone, but right now we're just going to do it this way. Then you're taking away the opportunities for them to behave really badly, because they probably don't really want to be that person. So you're helping them by doing that. And I really believe that.
So one key there that I picked up, and see if coach me if I have it wrong, but you lay out these boundaries, but the boundaries you lay out, they're for your protection, but it sounds like they almost, when you relay them to the other party, it's like a non-emotional event. And they're also protecting the other person from behaving badly, because you can only be abused if you allow people to abuse you. Sometimes you're in a situation where you don't have much choice, but for most of the time we do have a lot of choice. We just don't take that responsibility. So the key of it, as I guess with any coaching in any area of life, business or divorce, is that you have to be courageous enough to take responsibility, even when you don't really know what you're doing. But
you know that by feeding the fire, being angry, as you said, being emotional, that's not helping. But you mustn't put your emotions to the side. And this is a common mistake that people make. They go into sort of clinical, I'm going to control, and they just want to control the other person back. But if you have to come from a place of love and compassion, you need to stand in the shoes of that raging narcissist and think, oh, that must be horrible to be them. It must be horrible to be so angry. What can I do that's going to reduce the conflict? What can I do that's going to allow them to access their own children and not self-destruct their relationship with their children, which unfortunately does often happen. And it's a very tough thing to do when you just want that person to disappear and never see them again. So I'm asking a lot of people, but as a parent, that's what we sign up for. We are teaching our children something amazing if we can turn a messy breakup into a beautiful, constructive co-parenting, which is well boundaried and honest, because you can't lie. The kids will know if you're pretending. That's a very magical thing for them to learn and see happen, and because they're watching all the time.
All the time. I want to just go to a different direction real quick, and that's just simply, I'm just curious, how did this TEDx talk affect your current work that you're doing right now? Did that have an effect upon it, or did you already have your current work going and then decide to take all that work you're doing and put it into an 18-minute talk, which for me was the hardest part, and for a lot of people say that's the hardest part, was putting the work into this 18-minute thought of an idea. But how did that affect your current work? How did that talk affect you?
On a personal level, it was powerful because it was the first time I had always had lots of things to say, but what was this one idea that was worth sharing? And it helped me bring everything down to what I really care about. So when people, and a lot of people don't understand why I do what I do, they think there must be some catch here, what's she about? And I just say, watch the TEDx. And after someone's watched the TEDx, they go, oh, that's they know that it's not a logical thing. I shall do this today. It's something that I feel very much a sort of calling and a mission to do. But the experience of coming into it, I did some speakers training with Andy Harrington, who's a brilliant speakers trainer, and I met some lovely ladies there, and one of them decided to run a TEDx in the UK, and I applied and luckily got in. But it was already on my list of I'd love to do that. I just knew it would be an amazing thing to do, but it was quite terrifying. I mean, in what you saw, my right leg was wobbling so much that I thought I'd fall over. But luckily, it didn't show too much.
It didn't show.
It was.
Yeah. And there is something. Just for those who may be listening who would never consider doing a TEDx but want to do one. You got to be able to handle your nerves a little bit, because you're thinking, okay, there's only maybe 1,100 people in the audience or however many people in the audience, but this is out there for the next 100 years. And you got to be prepared for that. So it's a little bit difficult. I put the, by the way, URL up, and it'll be in the description for your TED Talk, because one thing you're right about, you don't really understand what you're teaching until you listen to the ideal that you share. So, some of us have great titles and describes everything. You have a great title, described it, but you didn't really understand until you listen to this, until you actually listen to it and you say, oh, it clicks now. And the fact that you use your own personal story a little bit in there, I mean, it just some people say it's are you an actor? Because I go into the role and I say, no, I'm just remembering. Remembering. But I think you're right. It for me, it was really, because what I do is unique and it is hard for people to get their heads around. They have to understand it on an emotional level before they can get it. It's cognitively, if you like. But it's one tip though that I give is as you said, you've got that one shot at it. And one thing I was taught was that when you're thinking,
I can't remember what I'm going to say next, then just don't think that, think, what does the audience need from me now? That was the most amazing piece of advice, because I was at one point where I really needed that. It's one point where if you watch, you can think I'm going, and it's good to have a pause, but what I was thinking is, what does the audience need from me now? And then it get back into flow. But it is quite a hair-raising experience. But for me, what was most powerful about it was there were two people I'd invited into the audience, and one was a lawyer, a family lawyer, and one was who was in a local firm, and one was a woman who was going through a very difficult divorce. And the lawyer, bearing in mind, he's certainly not anti-lawyer, but I do attack a toxic family law system quite openly in my TEDx. And she was totally got it, and it was great to have that sort of healthy reaction from her. But the woman who was going through divorce, she told me, she said, you made me cry, which is always like, well done, Susy. I've done a good job if I make people cry. She said, you made me cry. And she said, in the break before you did your talk, she said, I was literally telling people that if I could hire a hitman for my ex, I would.
You would.
And she said, and she said I wasn't. Yeah, and she said she wasn't joking. And then she watched the TEDx and cried. And then she said to me afterwards, she said that it completely changed her view of, because they had children. Completely turned it around. And that was, if nothing else, if no one ever watches this, I've done what I was supposed to do in this moment.
And one which saved tons, but then that's part of the TEDx. I mean, I think because you reached when you had one ideal, and you kind of already hit upon my next question was, inspire us. Who does this idea help? And you've already answered that. Anybody who's going through a divorce, and anybody who has somebody else in a divorce.
And anyone who's got children or co-workers, I mean, trying to work with someone if they're in a messy divorce, a badly managed divorce, it's awful. It puts a huge amount of pressure on everyone. The moment I realised was that, is there time to just tell a very short story about that?
Please.
I was at a business meeting in a hotel, and after the meeting, I was in the foyer of the hotel, and a plumber who'd been in the networking group came out, and he started to tell me about a divorce of his brother. And when he started to talk about the children, it was such a nasty divorce. He began to cry because he was talking about what was happening to his nephew and niece. And at that point, I remember standing there thinking, oh my God, it's not even his divorce. And yet he's so impacted by this. And that's the moment I realised how huge the impact is on every level, on society, on individuals, on families, in the workplace, and that the wrong messages are going out there. Often, I have to say, massively encouraged by the press. The press drive this toxic narrative, and I often openly attack them on my regular divorce TV show live stream, because I get really cross with the way they'll do an article about Bill Gates, for example, and focus on trying to make out that it's all going to go horrible, and they won't say, well, actually he's doing a really good job so far, and it seems to be very collaborative. It's very much the case. They very rarely applaud the success, but they try to make out, they're just desperate to show that it's a horrible thing. It's very strange.
Well, it sells papers, I guess, but that is so wrong to teach that. So wrong to teach. Now, talking about the impact. Now, this is kind of also goes back to my question about how does this TEDx affect your career? You have a 3-day boot camp. Did TEDx affect that any? Or did the 3-day boot camp affect the TEDx?
Well, it's not a 3-day boot. It's I do different things, but one of them is the one I'm looking to do more in the States now, as well as in the UK, is an online workshop. We keep it to 2 hours because that's the most Zoom anyone can take, but they have lots of other support and through the app and everything. It's not just 2 hours and off they go. But but with all the events and things that I provide, ultimately, yes, definitely, as raising my profile as someone who's not just some mad divorce coach type person, but because I'm not a divorce coach, I could be, but that's a specific job, and then I wouldn't have time to do what I'm doing. I'm much more of a strategist, and my mission is to change the way people divorce. And I can't do that if I'm just doing one-to-one divorce coaching clients. So that's why I have a much broader reach with the work I do. But yeah, so the TEDx has been very, very useful in positioning me for credibility on a professional level, also with building my network of other professionals like lawyers and mediators and financial experts. It is cool, though I do get quite a few people say, oh yeah, TEDx, I'd like to do one of those. Go for it.
Go for it. Go for it.
Go for it. Go and do it.
Tell us about, I don't know where I got 3 days from, but tell us about your boot camp. And tell us about it, then also make sure that everybody knows how to go get into this thing. But tell us about it.
They can get to everything through bestwaytodivorce.online, which takes them to the free app, and that's the gateway to many wonderful things. So, but apart from bestwaytodivorce.online, we have the online workshops which they can access through there, and those are essentially, that's where I give them information and inspiration, because you need both. There's no point just giving people information if they don't believe that they can make it work for themselves. So I inform and inspire them about the different tools in the dispute resolution toolbox, which 99% of them really either don't know them at all, or they don't understand how to use them appropriately. I make sure they understand the basics of the divorce process. A lot of them have seen lawyers, but they're so confused. I give them the plain English sort of dummies guide to this is how it works. And these are the things you catch people out. These are the things you've got to watch out for. And I then bring in a whole range of experts who they can, I interview them in front of them. They ask questions on the Zoom. They get their questions answered. So they get in that 2 hours lots of really good information. And they can start to understand who does what, who can help them, and they can have complementary meetings with one-to-one with all of those experts. They can just book them in. And because they need that. There's no point me just giving them all this information, and if they need to go and talk to that lawyer, talk to that mediator, talk to that financial expert or divorce coach, and find out how they can help them personally. So, and they all get that. They get that for a very small amount of money, but because it's just to get them in there and give them no excuse not to understand the choices. And then I'm kind of busting them a bit, so they can't then go, oh, I didn't understand it. No, they know these are the best ways to do it. These are the people who can help you, and how to save between 25 and $50,000 or pounds, depending on which country they're divorcing in, easy. So, and it's not hard to save that, because it's really easy to end up spending that money when you don't need to. So on a practical level, it's quite handy that way as well.
I want to ask you to tease this just a little bit. You started off by saying that there's a lot of tools there, and a lot of tools that we don't know about. Tease us. What's one tool that we don't know about that we should know about?
Well, one which is a tool combined with a strategy, which I actually found out about from a very experienced mediator in New York in 2012, and when I went there to visit the divorce fair that they were having there, and he and strangely many mediators don't use this, but I think they should. So for a start, from you've got mediation. Obviously is not about getting back together again. That's a very common misconception still. It's to help you break up. This impartial person is going to help you have that discussion. But sometimes there's one thing that you can't agree on, and it's usually emotionally driven. Maybe you're attached to the house and you're just not seeing sense. And if you just don't agree on that, then the whole mediation can unravel, and the next thing you know, you're in court, and the court isn't interested in the things you already did agree on. It's almost like you have to start all over again. So in order to make that mediation, to get the most from it, you can call in an arbitrator just for that particular area. And the couple together can just go, right, they decide that sometimes people just need someone else to make the decision for them. Not the whole divorce. They really they shouldn't hand that over to someone else. But that element. Oh, I'm so sorry. Background noise there. So what you can do is choose together. You're still doing this together, even if you're not getting on very well. You talk to different arbitrators who are highly trained. They're much more trained than quite often the judges that you'll end up with in court.
Yes.
And you say they're an expert in finance or expert in children, whatever the area is, and they will make a legally binding decision for you. And that means you can then carry on with the rest of the mediation, or that might round it up. You can do the same with collaborative law as well. So it doesn't need to stop and unravel. I don't know anybody else other than me that tells people that in this country.
No, I haven't heard that at all. And I have the feeling, just knowing you, that you're saying that this is a better way to do it, but it's also a less expensive way to do it.
Well, yeah, because you've got no barristers, no court fees. And the biggest thing is time, especially post-COVID. There's a huge waiting list for the courts. Do you really want to wait months and months and months when you can sort it out in weeks? Because all these alternative professionals are working online, whether it's collaborative law, arbitration, or mediation, and you control the time zone. So if you're a busy working person, you don't have to stop work to go to a court case. You can go, you fix the times yourself. So it keeps you as a couple in control. And it's such a debilitating, exhausting, traumatic experience for so many people to have that sense of decision-making control, that even if you're not agreeing on 99% of things with your spouse or soon-to-be ex-spouse, you can at least agree on, let's do the mediation, or let's try the collaborative law. And the other thing I think is really important in the toolbox is with mediation is if you are in an abusive relationship or things are very difficult, you'll often be told straight off, don't use mediation. You don't have to use it if you're in an abusive relationship. But actually, court's not great for that either. So often a narcissist uses the court. It's like a playground to them, and they because they don't stick to any of the rules. They do whatever they like, and the system's not set up for those people. So with mediation, you can be in breakout rooms on Zoom, and the mediator can shuttle between them, and they can do that in the physical world as well. You don't even have to sit in the same room. And you can keep that communication and cut that deal and just move on with your lives. So there's really so many ways to avoid going through the trauma and expense of court.
Think about that just by itself, ladies and gentlemen, just by itself. Breakout rooms, or if it's a Zoom breakout room, fine. If it's breakout rooms inside of a mediator's office, which we can start to do now. What a way to handle that situation. Mediator going back and forth. What a way to handle it. That's priceless right there. Priceless right there. I do want to be cognizant of your time. I don't want to take all day long. There's a lot more to discuss, though, but I want just to ask you, what questions should I have asked you that I didn't?
I think you've answered all the best questions. They've been great questions. I suppose if there was one more, it would be, why bother?
Great. Okay, so why bother? Why bother doing all this? Because we're so caught up in what everybody else says you should do anyway, and the standards, and we don't want to change the traditions. And the best way to get divorce is to have a court decide it. Why bother doing something new?
Particularly for those with children, if you choose to hand over all your power to a court and let them decide, you have no foundation for the ongoing, because that's not the end of it. Because you might, once you've sorted the finances and the co-parenting, suddenly one of you gets a new partner and it all falls apart again. Whereas if you can go, okay, let's go back to that mediator or those collaborative lawyers we used, who we trust and know, and let's sort this out. Or let's refer to the co-parenting plan we put in place with them. Oh yes, I did say that, didn't I? And you're putting in foundations. Whereas if you just hand it all over to court, you will find those people will often go back to court again and again. And the awful thing is, it can sometimes become the only way they can still connect with each other, albeit in a nasty way. Just like a child, if they want attention, if you don't give them attention, they will be naughty and horrible. Because some attention is better than none. You often see it in divorcing couples where they don't know they're doing it, but that's the only way they can get any attention. So there's a lot of fascinating psychology in it. But yeah, definitely it's worth taking those strong steps initially to do it, make peace your weapon of choice, put in boundaries, use all these amazing co-parenting online tools that are available, and use mediation or collaborative law, because you may need to go back and use them again. And that's going to save you money and massive amount of stress. And what a great role model then you become for your children.
That summed that up. I mean, I'm going to go backwards, but what a great role model you become. That's the most important thing, being a great role model. And then if you remember, stress kills, well, yeah, that's just great. Susy, thank you so very much for your time, your effort, your energy, and for doing the work you're doing. I think if we can get that message out in any way, that's just should help everybody that's in this type of culture, our culture, the United Kingdom and the United States knows. I think it'll help our cultures tremendously. And it helps leaders understand that they can at least point to the resources without getting involved, because it really is none of their business, but they can get involved by saying, go to this website and take a look. They may help us. Yeah. I don't want to be involved in it, but I'm just suggesting here's a resource for you that might make it easier for you.
They can signpost to it, and if their employees request that they want someone to come in and have the talk and give them a little more information, then I'm very happy for them to contact me.
Okay, I didn't get that part. Let's bring that part out real strong. So if someone in a corporation or organization says, okay, let's get a specialist in, and they want you do that. You travel?
Absolutely. Well, I definitely do it online, but if I can travel, I will as well. I might need expenses though if I'm traveling. But it's and the focus will usually be often it's about the co-parenting and how do you deal with everyone, how do you deal with your co-workers when they're going through these, what sometimes take years, these divorces and these fighting over the children. It's the stress on everybody in the teams. That's an area I'm particularly happy to empower people with. So, one time I thought I'll do courses for HR people, but no, everybody needs to know this. Everyone needs to know the information that I share, because that information could be the difference between a traumatized child and a poor family and a highly functioning co-parenting family.
Absolutely. So they can get a hold of you through bestwaytodivorce.online to set up a conversation for you to do something maybe virtually or in person with them.
Yes, absolutely. Or bestwaytodivorce.co.uk as well will take them to a website which has got phone numbers and contact. I'm not hard to find.
No. I like
Susy Miller with a Z, divorce, and I'm all over Google.
And so all over LinkedIn and everything. Google will find you. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. I just want to say thank you. I really enjoyed learning more. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll just tell you, go listen to the TEDx talk. You saw that earlier. It's in the description. Go listen to it. Thank you.